about Shakespearean fathers and their desire to control, especially their daughters. From Capulet in Romeo and Juliet to King Lear in the play of the same name, to Prospero in The Tempest, Shakespearean drama is packed full of iron-willed dads who expect to be obeyed without question and explode if they are not. But to what extent is that due to the social and historical context of the plays, rather than uniquely stubborn and dramatically powerful father figures? In the later 16th century, England was ruled by a queen, Queen Elizabeth. However, in spite of this, women were invariably seen as inferior to men. Stereotypically, they were believed to be weaker, less intelligent, and even prone to evil. The church was enormously powerful in Elizabethan England, and every word in the Bible was believed to be true. Therefore, with Eve persuading Adam to eat the fruit of the forbidden tree in an act of original sin in the book of Genesis, other women were seen as similarly susceptible to evil and temptation. Within this society, fathers would not only expect to rule their daughters, but their wives as well. Divorce was virtually unknown, and women had fewer legal rights than men. Therefore, a daughter disobeying her father could potentially result in catastrophic consequences. With no modern safety net such as the welfare system, charities to support vulnerable women, and social housing, a daughter could very quickly lose her home and have no means of supporting herself. There is no doubt that Elizabethan fathers held considerably more power than modern ones. However, it is the extreme reactions of Shakespearean fathers that make his dramas so compelling. In Romeo and Juliet, Capulet decides that his daughter Juliet should marry Paris, a relative of Prince Aeschylus of Verona, no less. However, there is one slight problem. Juliet is already married. She tries to reject the proposal, saying that it is too sudden. Capulet is furious at what he perceives as his daughter's disgraceful, causeless disobedience. He rails in a series of disbelieving rhetorical questions. Does she not give us thanks? Is she not proud? Does she not count her blessed, unworthy as she is, that we have brought so worthy a gentleman to be her bride? These words reveal a great deal about not just Capulet's values, but society as a whole. Juliet, as the woman, is unworthy and should be grateful for being married to a gentleman of good repute and social standing. Capulet uses the pompous first-person plural, we, to highlight his own high status as a man and as a father, emphasising his incredulity at his daughter seemingly not accepting his commands. So Capulet gets increasingly worked up and refuses to even listen to his daughter, who shows her respect in her reference to him as good father, even though his recent language clearly does not deserve this label. He cries that he will drag his daughter to church on a hurdle. A hurdle was a wooden rack used for dragging traitors to their execution, their death. To use this metaphor about his own daughter shows that he feels that his reputation, his desire to be in control, is more important than the life of his own vulnerable flesh and blood. In addition, the verb drag suggests Capulet is prepared to forcefully move his daughter to church, certainly hurting her pride and sense of self-esteem, but probably physically as well. Capulet's language is extraordinarily abusive, and it is important to remember that he has no idea that Juliet has disobeyed him in a much more serious way by marrying Romeo. One can only imagine the terms he would use if he knew the truth. He roars, "Out, you green sickness, carrion!" The exclamation mark shows him raising his voice in anger, whilst the reference to green sickness carrion labels Juliet, his own daughter, and one he called affectionately "my child," in conversation with Paris in Act 1, Scene 2, as pale-faced rotten meat. In modern times, this would be seen as a terrible insult, but in Elizabethan times, even more so, with women denied opportunities beyond that of marriage, for which a pleasing appearance would be deemed essential. Rotten men obviously smells terrible, so the insult also suggests Juliet has an appallingly unfeminine odour. But it is not just Capulet among Shakespearean tragedies who can get so enraged by filial disobedience. King Lear opens with a king of the same name telling his daughters that he plans to give up power and divide the kingdom between them. However, first he asks, "Which of you, shall we say, doth love us most?" elder two daughters are happy to describe their love, but the youngest, Cordelia, refuses. She loves her father dearly, but refuses to flatter him with over-the-top, flowery words and phrases. She says simply, "I love your majesty according to my bonds, no more nor less." Lear is as enraged as Capulet over what he sees as willful non-cooperation and disrespect. He cries, "For, by the sacred radiance of the sun, the mysteries of Hecate, here I disclaim all my maternal care." Hecate was the ancient goddess associated with magic and witchcraft, and Lear, swearing by her powers, illustrates that he now associates his daughter's stubbornness with evil. In fact, he is so enraged by the refusal of Cordelia to describe her love in terms agreeable to him, he disowns her, terminates their relationship with immediate effect. However, Shakespeare indicates that such extreme reactions to apparent filial disobedience can have disastrous consequences, not just for the daughter, but for the fuming father. In Romeo and Juliet, Capulet's words result in Juliet having to pretend to be physically dead, an extreme reaction to a dispute over a marriage, but one Juliet feels is necessary due to her father's rage. However, this plan fails, and Juliet genuinely dies. In other words, a father's desperate desire to control a daughter has resulted ultimately in her death and in his grief. In Act 4, Scene 5, Capulet's grief is shown when he cries to Paris, "O son, the night before thy wedding day hath death lain with my wife." Shakespeare's personification of death makes it seem all the more overbearing and powerful, whilst the repetition of the word death shows that Capulet seems utterly overwhelmed about his loss of Juliet. He declares melodramatically, "I will die and leave death all, life, living, all is death's." So Capulet's initial desire to control Juliet has left her dead, and him claiming at least that there is nothing worth living for anymore. In a similar way, the play King Lear also ends in disaster for both father and daughter. King Lear is driven mad by, ultimately, his failure to understand or control his daughters. A former king, he is left in Act 3, Scene 2, crying impotently and crazily to the weather, "Blow, winds, and crack your cheeks! Rage, blow!" The use of short imperatives, impotent orders towards the weather, highlights his complete loss of power and sanity. Shakespeare is surely suggesting that an obsessive desire to control daughters can result in tragedy. To conclude, there is no question that Shakespearean and Elizabethan fathers felt entitled to rule their daughters. However, the extraordinary way in which Capulet in Romeo and Juliet, Lear in King Lear, turn on and abuse their children would have been shocking to a contemporary audience, and even more so to a modern one. Shakespeare shows that such extreme reactions only result in tragedy for all concerned.